The South Florida Water Management District is paying $8.10 an hour to hunt the slithering creatures. They say the hunt is for a good cause, to save rabbits, raccoons, even deer that are being eaten up by all these pythons.
A $31 billion ecosystem is a lot to lose, and for a long time, it looked like Florida was losing. The Burmese python invasion seemed unstoppable until now. Something is moving through the heart of the Everglades that is about to end this nightmare once and for all. Because after decades, the most expensive wilderness in North America has finally found a way to defend itself. The $31 billion value. Most people look at the Florida Everglades and see a giant, soggy mess of grass and mud. They think it is just a place where gators hang out and bugs bite you. But that is not even close to the truth. The Everglades is actually a massive money-making machine that helps keep Florida alive. In fact, new reports from 2025 and 2026 show that this patch of grass is worth over $31 billion every single year. This huge number comes from all the hard work the swamp does for free. Think of the Everglades as a giant natural water filter. Under the ground sits a layer of rock called the Biscayne Aquifer. This is where more than 8 million people get their drinking water. Without the Everglades sitting on top of it, that water would run dry or get salty. The swamp catches rain, cleans it, and slowly pours it back into the ground. If humans had to build a machine to do that, it would cost billions and billions of dollars. The weather also plays a part in the entire process. Florida is famous for big storms and hurricanes. When a massive storm hits the coast, the Everglades acts like a giant sponge. It soaks up the extra water so it does not end up in someone's living room. It also breaks the strength of the wind and waves. Scientists say this flood protection alone is worth about $8 billion a year. On top of that, the beauty of the swamp brings in millions of people who spend money on boats, hotels, and food. This $31 billion system was built over thousands of years. It was a perfect world where everything had a job. Big flocks of birds would fill the sky, alligators kept the water paths open, and small animals like raccoons and bobcats lived everywhere. It was a balanced machine that worked perfectly until humans started messing with it. For a long time, we thought we could just keep taking from the swamp without giving anything back. We spent money on huge projects to fix it, but nature was about to throw a curveball that no amount of money could stop. 1992 and the perfect storm. The year 1992 changed the face of Florida forever. It started with a storm called Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 monster with winds blowing at over 165 miles per hour. It was so strong that it flattened entire neighborhoods in less than an hour. People lost their homes, cars, and even their lives. But in the middle of all that chaos, something else happened that nobody noticed at the time. Just outside of Miami, near the edge of the swamp, there was a large reptile breeding facility. It was filled with exotic animals from all over the world. When the winds of Hurricane Andrew hit that building, the walls and roof were ripped apart like they were made of paper. In the wreckage, hundreds of Burmese pythons escaped. These snakes were not from Florida, but from Southeast Asia. They slid out of their broken cages and vanished into the dark, wet grass of the Everglades. For a long time, people blamed the entire python problem on that one building and that one storm. But that is not the whole story. The truth is much more complicated. During the 90s, people were obsessed with owning giant snakes as pets. You could go to a reptile show and buy a baby Burmese python for as little as $10. They were small enough to fit in your hand, and they looked cool. But there was a catch. These snakes grow incredibly fast. A tiny snake that fits in a shoebox can become a 10-foot-long predator that weighs 50 pounds in just a few years. Suddenly, people had a massive snake in their living room that was eating expensive food and getting too dangerous to handle. Instead of doing the right thing, many pet owners drove to the edge of the Everglades and let them go. They thought they were being kind to the animals and that they were giving the snakes a new home in the wild. In reality, they were releasing a biological weapon into one of the most important places on Earth. The Everglades was the perfect place for these snakes to hide and grow. It was hot, wet, and full of food that had never seen a giant snake before. The pythons did not have to work hard to find a meal because they were faster and stronger than anything else in the swamp. While the state was busy cleaning up the mess left by Hurricane Andrew, the pythons were busy breeding. A single female can lay up to 100 eggs at a time, and because there were no big predators to eat the baby snakes, almost all of them survived. They were becoming a ghost army in the grass, moving silently and growing larger every day. And by the time anybody realized what was happening, it was already too late. The mammal collapse. The Everglades used to be a place known for its noise, and you could not walk a few feet without hearing the rustle of a small animal in the brush. If you stood still at night, the air was thick with the sounds of life, because millions of small mammals were busy moving through the sawgrass. But as the Burmese python population began to grow tremendously, a strange and heavy quiet started to settle over the swamp. Scientists who had worked in the park for decades were the first to notice that the woods felt empty and that the usual chatter of the wilderness had simply stopped. They realized that the $31 billion ecosystem was going through a massive change that was wiping out the animals that had lived there for thousands of years. In 2013, a major study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences finally proved exactly how bad the situation had become. The researchers drove thousands of miles through the park to count animals, and the data they collected was shocking to the entire scientific world. In the areas where the pythons had been living the longest, the number of raccoons had dropped by 99.3%. Opossums were down by 98.9%, and bobcats had declined by 87%. Even animals like marsh rabbits and foxes had essentially been erased from the map in many parts of the southern Everglades. The pythons were eating their way through the food chain so fast that the native animals did not even have time to learn how to hide from them. The problem is that Florida mammals evolved for a very long time without ever seeing a giant constrictor snake. A raccoon or a rabbit knows how to watch out for a hawk in the sky or an alligator in the water, but they have no defense against a predator that can hold its breath underwater for 30 minutes and strike in total darkness. The pythons were essentially finding a perfect food source that was completely defenseless against them. This collapse of small mammals is a disaster for the entire state, because these animals are the ones that keep the swamp healthy by spreading seeds and more. Without them, the Everglades becomes a stagnant and broken system where only the invaders thrive. While people were busy looking for snakes in the grass, they missed the fact that the very heart of the ecosystem was being ripped out. Florida knew it had to find a way to stop the bleeding before there was nothing left to save. The state decided to turn to the public for help and launched a plan that sounded like something out of a movie. Why drones and bounty hunters aren't enough? To fix the problem, Florida turned to one of the most famous and strange experiments in wildlife history. In the early 2000s, the state realized that the pythons had spread so far that traditional park rangers could no longer keep up with them. This led to the creation of the Florida Python Challenge, which is an annual event where the state pays hundreds of regular people to march into the muck and catch as many snakes as they can for cash prizes. While this makes for great news headlines and television shows, the actual data shows a very different story about how effective it really is. In 2024, the total haul for the competition was only 195 pythons. When you compare that to the estimated population of 300,000 snakes, the math reveals that humans are barely making a dent. Even the professional hunters who work for the state year-round are struggling to keep pace with the breeding cycle. Since 2017, these paid experts have removed over 23,000 snakes, which sounds like a lot until you realize it is likely less than 5% of the total population. The state has tried to use high-tech tools to bridge this gap, but almost every single one has failed. due to the harsh reality of the swamp. They tried using drones with thermal cameras to spot the snakes from the air. But because pythons are cold-blooded, they stay the same temperature as the surrounding grass and water, making them invisible to the sensors. They even tried building robot rabbits to lure the snakes into traps. But pythons are ambush predators that rely on heat and movement, so they completely ignored the mechanical decoys. One of the few methods that actually works is called the Judas snake program. Biologists catch a male python, put a radio tracker inside it, and let it go back into the wild. Because snakes are social during the breeding season, the male lead the scientists straight to large groups of females. This has helped find some of the biggest breeding balls ever recorded, but it is a slow and expensive process that cannot be scaled up enough to cover millions of acres. The experts are starting to realize that the snakes are also changing their behavior to avoid us. Data from the Conservancy of Southwest Florida shows that pythons are moving away from the roads and levees where humans walk. They are sliding deeper into the remote parts of the Big Cypress National Preserve, where no person can follow. The snakes are not just winning because of their numbers anymore. They are winning because they are adapting to our tactics and finding new ways to stay hidden. While Florida was busy focusing on traps and hunters, a much smaller and more terrifying threat was already spreading through the water. It was a killer that nobody saw coming because it was too small to see with the naked eye, and this new enemy was about to prove that the python was carrying a secret weapon inside its own body. The microscopic assassin. This new enemy is a tiny parasite from Asia called the snake lungworm, or Ralliatiella orientalis, and it came to Florida by hitching a ride inside the Burmese pythons. These pythons have lived with the lungworm for thousands of years in their homelands, so their bodies are used to it, and it does not usually kill them. But for the native snakes of Florida, this tiny worm is a death sentence that is spreading like a wildfire through the swamp. The way this parasite moves through the ecosystem is truly gross and very effective. An infected python leaves its waste in the water, and that waste is filled with tiny lungworm eggs. Small creatures like cockroaches and beetles eat the waste and pick up the eggs. Then, frogs and lizards eat the bugs. Finally, a native Florida snake comes along and eats the frog. Once the parasite is inside the native snake, it does not stay in the stomach. It actually tunnels through the body and heads straight for the lungs. Once there, the worms hook into the tissue and start sucking blood and growing. They get so big and numerous that they eventually block the airways completely. Dr. Christina Romagosa from the University of Florida was one of the first people to see how bad this was getting. She started finding native snakes, like black racers and garter snakes that looked skinny and weak. When she looked inside them, she found their lungs were packed with dozens of these writhing white worms. In some cases, the snakes were so full of parasites that they actually suffocated. The most scary part of her research is that the lungworm has now jumped into at least 19 different species of native Florida snakes. This means the parasite no longer needs the Burmese python to keep spreading. It is now moving from native snake to native snake, all on its own. This is a huge problem because it adds to the destruction to the Everglades. While the pythons are busy eating all the mammals from the top of the food chain, the lungworm is busy wiping out the native snakes from the middle of the food chain. This tiny worm has already been found as far north as Jacksonville, which is hundreds of miles away from where the pythons live. Scientists are worried that even if every single python was removed tomorrow, this plague would stay in Florida forever. It is a permanent change to the biology of the state that we simply do not know how to stop yet. But in the middle of all this death, researchers found one specific animal that seemed to be winning the fight. They noticed that one type of snake was living in the same dirty water, but was not getting sick at all. The cottonmouth mystery. The discovery that changed everything happened while scientists were looking for more dead snakes. As they tracked the spread of the lungworm across the state, they noticed a strange pattern that did not make sense. While almost every other native snake species was turning up with lungs full of parasites, the Florida cottonmouth was the lone exception. These venomous pit vipers live in the exact same muddy water and eat the exact same frogs as the snakes that were dying in droves. By all accounts, the cottonmouths should have been the first ones to get sick, yet survey after survey showed they were perfectly healthy. This created a massive mystery that has become the most important puzzle in Florida wildlife biology today. Scientists believe that something inside the cottonmouth is acting like a biological shield against the invader. There are a few theories about why this is happening. One idea is that the cottonmouth has a super strong immune system that can identify the lungworm larvae the moment they enter the body and kill them before they reach the lungs. Another theory focuses on the chemistry of their blood, or even the unique proteins in their venom. Since cottonmouths are built to handle some of the most toxic environments in the swamp, they might have a natural defense that other snakes simply never developed. Researchers are currently studying the DNA of these snakes to see if they can find the specific gene that keeps them safe. This is a huge deal because if we can figure out how the cottonmouth stays healthy, we might be able to help other species survive the plague. It is definitely a glimmer of hope, considering how bad things had been getting over the years, and it shows that nature is not just sitting back and letting the invasion happen without a fight. The return of the king. The plan to save the Everglades took a massive turn when Florida decided to bring back the rightful king of the southern forests. This is the eastern indigo snake, and it is a creature that seems like it was designed in a lab specifically to hunt other snakes. It is the longest native snake in all of North America, and it can grow up to 9 feet long. These snakes are beautiful to look at because their scales are a deep blue-black color that shines like polished metal when the sun hits them. But for other snakes in the swamp, seeing that blue shine is the last thing they will ever experience. The eastern indigo is what scientists call an ophiophagus, which is just a fancy way of saying it is a professional snake eater. Unlike the Burmese python, which uses its body to squeeze the life out of its prey, the indigo snake has a much more direct and violent way of hunting. It has incredibly powerful jaws and a thick skull that allows it to simply grab another snake by the head and swallow it whole while it is still alive. The indigo is also completely immune to the venom of every rattlesnake and cottonmouth in Florida. It can take a bite from a diamondback that would kill a human in minutes, and it will just keep eating like nothing happened. Unfortunately, this king was almost wiped out decades ago because of human development. The indigo snake depends on another animal called the gopher tortoise to survive. These tortoises dig deep holes in the ground that stay at a perfect temperature all year round. The indigo snakes use these burrows to hide from the summer heat and the winter cold. As people built more roads and houses, the tortoises lost their homes and the indigo snakes vanished right along with them. By the late 70s, the eastern indigo was functionally gone from the northern parts of the state. For over 40 years, conservation groups worked to fix this mistake by restoring the old pine forests and protecting the gopher tortoises. Then, in late 2023, something amazing happened at the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve. A trail camera caught footage of 2 tiny indigo snake hatchlings moving through the leaves. These were not snakes that humans had released, but were wild-born babies, which meant the indigo snakes were finally breeding on their own in the wild for the first time in half a century. This is the moment the balance of power in Florida started to change. The king is back, and it is starting to build an army that is ready to move south toward the python's territory. But while the indigo is preparing to reclaim its kingdom, it is not the only native animal that has decided to stop being a victim. Deep in the heart of the big cypress swamp, another native predator was about to prove that even a small hunter can take down a giant if it is smart enough. The home team was finally learning how to win, and the first blow was caught on a camera that shocked the entire world. Native predators fight back. For 20 years, the story of the Everglades was always the same. The Burmese python was the scary monster, and every native animal was just a helpless victim. It seemed like the food chain only moved in one direction. But nature has a way of catching up, And recently, the cameras have started to capture something totally new. Native predators that used to run away from the pythons are now starting to see them as a big, slow lunch. The most famous example of this happened when a team of researchers went to check on a python they had been tracking named Loki. When they found the signal, they did not find a living snake. Instead, they found a carcass that had been ripped apart. When they checked a nearby trail camera, they saw something that blew their minds. A bobcat that weighed only 25 pounds had attacked the python, which weighed over 50 pounds. And the craziest thing is that the bobcat did not just stumble into the snake. It stalked it, waited for the perfect moment, and then attacked the snake from an angle where it could not bite back. The bobcat won the fight, and then even hid the body so it could come back and eat more later. This was a huge deal because it showed that a native mammal half the size of the invader had figured out how to kill it. It is not just the bobcats either. Alligators are the old kings of the swamp, and they have finally started to adjust their hunting styles too. For a long time, gators and pythons mostly stayed out of each other's way. But now there is more and more footage of big alligators ambushing pythons in the water. Even birds of prey like hawks and eagles have been seen diving down to grab young pythons out of the grass. This is called behavioral learning. The native animals have lived with the snakes long enough now that they are losing their fear and starting to find the snake's weak spots. The pythons are still winning the numbers game, though, but the one-sided slaughter is officially over. It has turned into a real war where the home team is scoring points every single day. The swamp is becoming a much more dangerous place for an invasive snake to live. But as the native predators get tougher and the indigo snakes move south, everything is heading toward a massive crash that no one has ever seen before. The two biggest forces in the Florida woods are now on a collision course that will change the $31 billion ecosystem forever. It is a showdown that has been 50 years in the making, and the results are going to be wild. North meets South. Everything in this story is now pulling together toward a single point on the map. To the north, the eastern indigo snakes are successfully breeding and pushing their way down into the new woods and fields. To the south, the Burmese python is continuing its slow crawl toward the north as it searches for more food and warmer ground. These two ranges are moving toward each other like two freight trains on the same track. This is the great collision that scientists have been waiting to see for years, and it is finally happening in real time. The battle between these two snakes will be unlike anything else in nature. The Burmese python is a heavy and slow giant that wins its fights by using its massive weight to crush things. But the indigo snake is built for speed and high-level intelligence. It does not wait around to be grabbed. It strikes fast, and it has the jaw strength to crush the head of its prey before the fight even starts. While a full-grown python is much bigger than an indigo snake, the indigo has spent millions of years evolving to kill and eat other snakes. It is a specialist in this kind of combat. No one has a clear video of this fight in the wild yet, but the data suggests that the indigo snake is the only animal in North America that could actually hunt the python on a large scale. But there is a very dark side to this meeting that has biologists worried. The lungworm parasite that we talked about earlier is also moving north. It is spreading much faster than the snakes, and it is already waiting in the very areas where the indigo snakes are headed. This means that as the indigo snakes move south to save the ecosystem, they are walking directly into a biological trap. If the indigo snake does not have the same natural shield that the cottonmouth has, the king could be taken down by a tiny worm before it ever gets a chance to fight the pythons. We are watching a $31 billion treasure chest become a giant laboratory where the rules of life are being rewritten every day. The collision between the king, the invader, and the parasite is the final chapter of this war, and the stakes could not be any higher. The future of Florida now rests on which of these creatures can adapt the fastest. Can a broken system heal? The question that remains for the state of Florida is whether $31 billion of engineering and a few thousand hungry predators are enough to fix what was broken. We are currently watching the largest restoration project in the history of the world take place in the Everglades. Workers are moving millions of gallons of water and tearing down old roads to let the swamp breathe again. But the biological side of the fix is much more unpredictable. Nature does not always follow the plans that humans write down on paper. For the first time in a generation, there is real evidence that the system is trying to heal itself. The return of the indigo snake and the new hunting habits of the bobcats show that the Everglades is not a dead place. It is a living and breathing machine that is trying to find a new way to survive. Some scientists believe that we will never truly get rid of every single python, but we might reach a point where the native animals can keep the snake numbers low enough to let the mammals return. This would be a new kind of balance, where the value of the swamp is protected not by hunters with arms, but by the animals that were born to live there. Every new trail camera clip and every wild-born hatchling is a small win in a very long war. We are learning that saving an ecosystem is not just about stopping an invader, but about giving the original residents the tools they need to fight back. The next few years will decide if the Everglades stays a ghost town or if it returns to the loud and crowded wonderland it used to be. The story of the Florida swamp is far from over, and the most violent and exciting chapters are being written right now. If the eastern indigo snake fails to stop the pythons, do you think the $31 billion Everglades is lost forever? Or will the microscopic lungworm end up being the real winner that wipes out every snake in Florida, regardless of whose side they are on? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.